and sort of flesh out those. I'm looking here, I guess it's 8 components from the course structure and then another 5 from the teaching and learning, that I think we can put together something that will have great utility, that will be well received by not only peer reviewers, but by instructors who are interested in improving their courses. And then lastly, as Ed has suggested a number of times, it's really all about improvement. It's not just, well, I met the standards or I didn't meet the standards. And even if I met the standards, where are some areas for improvement? How can I really make this, an exemplary course, not just, a good or a quality course? In terms of the Sidelight Conference, Ed, looks like maybe he's, there he is. He had talked a little bit about the partnership with OLC. In particular, we do have a signed agreement with them now. Thank you very much, Ed, for doing that, since Gary and KCPT weren't comfortable doing it. So, we can perhaps, I think, talk about both the partnership and where we're at in the development of this new course scorecard. And then lastly, to your point, Kathy, about getting some training, I thought from early on that the fundamentals workshop, looking at a variety of rubrics on course design, would be an appropriate alternative to maybe applying the rubric training from QM, although not precluding people who have had the QM training from serving as a peer reviewer moving forward. Ed, I think by now has completed the mastery series on the scorecard and might want to speak to that. But since the next fundamentals workshop isn't until October 10th, I'm sure Jennifer would be happy to share with us. I didn't see any faculty bios on their website, but they probably have, 3 or 4 different people who lead that workshop, who I think, if we could consult with them, kind of maybe follow our progress as we develop the scorecard to give us, some feedback if they think we're on track or not, might be an alternative way as we're waiting to actually get some formal training. So, Ed, that's kind of my summary. I'll let Kathy weigh in if she's got some additional observations or comments.
We may need to unmute you, Kathy.
That would help, wouldn't it? Sorry about that. I think my main point in that email, I worked on the email for a few days to try to make it make sense. And I think that, Tim, you're right. Pulling that teaching and learning back into it is a good idea, because I kept going back to that when I was trying to work with the course structure section. And there's some pedagogy in there, but there's also stuff like engagement and activities and things that really need to be in what we're trying to put together. So I definitely think that we should be pulling that. My big concern, and Becky agreed with me, I think, is more that we're trying to, like you said, overthink it. If we're trying to break it down, when we were asked to do just the first 2 standards, that it kind of limited us, and it made us try to make it more detailed than it needed to be at this point. And we were getting buried in that rather than looking at the big picture as a whole and making it more inclusive and more simple and more effective. And I think that's kind of what my goal was, to see if we could open it up to the teaching and learning, the course structure. And I would even say looking through the rest of that rubric and making sure there's not other things that we were missing as well. And that's why I suggested someone like Ed, who's already gone through the mastery series, and I'm reading through the handbook, but I'm not doing it real quickly. But I am getting through it. And I think there are things that we should probably look at to pull into what we're doing, just to make it, cohesive, make it work. Otherwise, we're going to be backtracking for a long time, I think. So I hope that made sense.
It did, Kathy, and I thought that was a great suggestion in terms of looking at the handbook, which is a very big handbook, and I was remiss in not printing it before I retired from Washburn, because it's going to take a lot of paper to make a hard copy. I'm just curious, although you obviously sounds like you haven't gone through the whole thing, is there anything that you've stumbled upon at this point that you think would be good to include?
Nothing specific other than, I mean, there are some things like technology support. That's something, and as we both, Becky and I both mentioned, we're so ingrained in QM that it's kind of hard to separate ourselves a little bit. But it is important that there be some support in the technology in your course design. There's a couple of things in here that, making sure that support is there, making sure that the technology is current, that kind of thing, I think should be pulled through. And I'm probably a little less than, I'm probably about halfway through the whole handbook. It's 148 pages, just FYI. But I think we need to look at it as a whole, and not so much that there's very specific standards that we need to pull into this rubric, but that we need to have that whole idea in our head while we're working through it.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and I'll be curious to hear from you. That was a big
circle, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you. I think that, we don't want to dumb it down, but we don't want to overthink it. We want to consider the whole, but let's also not lose sight of, course review versus program or institutional review, because that's the other part of the proposal was, I hope at some point we'll be able to offer a program/institutional review using the full OLC scorecard as an alternative to, going for a third-party review at $7,500, coming through us for $3,500 or whatever. So while I both agree and appreciate, that broader perspective, our immediate concern, it seems, is how do we help faculty or designers who've put together a specific course ensure that that course is as best as it can possibly be relative to the most appropriate standards at the course level.
I think one thing we don't want to forget about is, and I'm trying to look through the handbook while I'm sitting here to try to remind myself a little bit, there's a whole section on course development and instructional design. And then you've got the course structure, and then you've got also teaching and learning. And I think all of those need to be put together into a course review. And now my point of looking at the whole thing is more of a philosophical thing than it is anything else. I mean, I'm not saying we should be looking at institutional support for this particular thing, but it is important that a faculty member have links in the course for technology support.
Sure.
That's
Absolutely.
The kind of thing I'm referring to. I'm not saying does the university have that support, just can the student get to it?
Or disability services, for example.
Disability services,
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's stuff that I think needs to be kept in mind. And just having a look at some of this stuff as a whole, another one that's very, very short, social and student engagement. That's part of course design. And I don't want us to forget about those things. And that's why I said in my email, I'm not saying we all as a whole, the whole group need to make sure we've read this thing, but I do think that the person that's kind of coordinating it should be familiar with the whole thing. Does that make that? Yeah.
The social and student engagement is outside the course though.
But no, because they're saying that the students should be provided a way to interact with other students in an online community. And this is outside the course, but that still is that can still be part of that course design. If you're trying to provide them with ways to interact and build community, then there's things in the classroom that you can do that might encourage that. Now, should that be like an end-all be-all level 3 as a QM would say? No, but I do think that it might be part of an effective course design that help develop that community that makes it more effective.
I agree. I feel it's important to at least provide that opportunity.
Right.
I mean, that's what's key here, right?
The way I am looking at it.
And can't we, there are things that we do as a department to add into our template so that we have those accessible so that faculty don't add them in individually. Can't that be something that can be added at the LMS level? And so we're asking, is this part of your LMS? Just like we ask about the accessibility of the LMS.
Okay.
Because they
It
have to
depends
have
on
a
the
VTAC.
LMS though, too, because Blackboard doesn't have that kind of feature because you have to have at least a link in the course. But Angel would have something that you could do that way. So,
Well, that would happen on the homepage, though, if you had community organizations and things as such.
You can build it in so that that's kind of a template part. Now, whether or not we want to do that and require that, I don't know, but it's possible in Blackboard. I know because we've got paid things that are just automatically included on our front page.
Yeah, we do too.
But they can take it out.
It might also be once this larger group, not a terribly large group, maybe 4 people. I'm thinking if I were to chair this group and Deanna were to join Becky and Kathy, that gives us a pretty good core to work on this. But there may be some things that we ultimately, after we've gone through this in a little bit more detail, and I've read all 148 pages, that we might want to reference but not necessarily include as part of the specific course review. Things like, the student social engagement and community, to make an observation about whether that's present or not, or a vehicle for doing that within the course without necessarily rating that. So that might be another balance between the more specific and the broader concerns.
Yeah, those annotations area, I do think that that's important that we have those annotations. And that's where we can reference this stuff.
Right. Well, Ed, do you have any more thoughts about all of this, particularly training and consulting with OLC folks?
Well, I think that one of the things in the training I went through was the big picture. It was really looking at all of the different standards that they had. And a lot of times what they're just looking for is, do you have something to support this? A lot of times you don't have to drill into a course if there's a need for technical support. When I did QM reviews, a lot of time if I would go in and do a review as a reviewer in QM, if I saw that there was a link on the login page, whether it's Blackboard or whatever it was, to accessibility, that met that need. It may not have to be inside that course, but there was maybe a link to the accessibility office. Maybe there was a link out there to the help desk. And so a lot of times, I think that's what we're looking for is it may not always be inside those courses. I think a lot of times what we do here at Johnson County is I have on the main login page, we call them widgets, but they're just basically little boxes that say campus support. Here is where you can go and get assistance on all the different things. And to me, is it there? Is a student that logs into this LMS environment able to find those kinds of resources? Yes. So they can click on that. And good instructors that design courses will make links inside their courses to those same resources. So I don't know that you're always going to see every single thing inside a specific course, but if I log into the LMS, there should be something that might reference, the help desk and accessibility and all that stuff. The other thing is there's a lot of strong emphasis on what goes into the syllabus. Once again, looking at a syllabus that is put into a course, is it indicating where they can get assistance if you're a student that has special needs for the help desk. So it once again is a much holistic, great big picture look at everything. Last time I went through a QM review, I was jumping all over the place, inside the courses, outside the courses, looking to see where I could find these links to other resources that were there.
Just out of curiosity, thanks, Ed. When having not done a QM course review myself, before that's begun, I presume that the course instructor or designer obviously has had some familiarity with QM, maybe completed the applying the rubric, has done a couple courses. But are they kind of as a default given a list of the specific standards to say, here's what we're going to be looking for, and it would be helpful up front if, for example, many of the things relative to student services or disabilities are within the LMS, not the course, to let us know up front where those are rather than having to, as you say, Ed, jump around from the larger system to the course to find those. Is that part of the methodology in QM?
It's part of the questionnaire or the form that the instructor fills out or the IR fills out. So maybe that's the answer, is we have a form that says, where are these located within your LMS or your course?
Okay.
What do you think, guys?
I agree. Simply put, I think that that's the best way to go.
I mean, we still have access to the QM stuff. We could go and take a look at what that application form looks like and what's included in there. I know that I think you have to. It's
long and really long.
Well, that's where we cut things out if we don't want to.
Yeah.
Sounds like QM to me.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind is QM was always focusing on course design, not anything about delivery. And at some point, I think at our campus, at least the chairs of our departments and the deans in our departments are looking for, maybe not the fall, but at some point, what are the things that we would like to focus on for the delivery side? And that may be a phase 2 or phase 3, but I think we can come up with a checklist that does point to the OLC scorecard that says, do you have your syllabus and what is included in this syllabus and that kind of stuff. I think we can come up with that. But then a phase 2 or phase 3, maybe on into late fall, into the spring, might also come up with some things that would give maybe our administrators on our campuses some guidelines as to what they should be looking at when they go into a live course and actually have conversations with the faculty.
It's a great idea, Ed.
We have to, one thing, I don't know how their schools are, but we get into trouble with the evaluation process with faculty and how that goes. And when we start assessing or evaluating instructors on their teaching, we can get crosswise with that process. So it's going to be important to, at each institution, I imagine, verify how you're going to implement that piece of it.
I certainly can appreciate that, Deanna. I think what we want to really emphasize in this process, like we did at the board meeting when Laura and Kathy, I forget your provost name, but she expressed a similar concern about faculty's concerns or resistance to this, that first and foremost, at least from the consortium's perspective, this is a voluntary process. You all may have institutional policies that mandate it, but that's an institutional policy and practice, not a consortium. Second point, I guess, is I'm looking again at the thing that I created early on with the teaching and learning standards. And to me, this is not unlike saying for heaven's sake, there have been decades upon decades and books upon books about what constitutes good, effective teaching. There's been a ton of research on it. These are simply 5 standards that speak to that. And if an institution chooses not to want to maybe include that as part of the review or not to deal with that because it's too political, so be it. That's up to the institution. But I think, as Kathy suggested, this will add value. And while it's not necessarily all about pedagogy, I appreciate the fact that this is research-based like the QM, but some of it's just, common sense. And so I think there's more value to be added by including those standards, even if a particular institution chooses to not engage faculty on the results of those.
I think the other thing to keep in mind is that if you go through an institutional review, the OLC scorecard, what they're looking for is basically documentation that supports what you're doing on this. And every institution is going to be different. So, I don't say that we're dictating, how you do it. It's just you're going to need to provide, at your institution, do you have a process in place that addresses these? You know, on the teaching and learning thing, it says feedback on student assignments is provided in a timely manner. You know, no one outside my institution is going to be able to do that. But is there a policy in place that might say, you know, we respond to emails within 24 hours during normal business weeks, within 48 hours on a weekend? You know, those are the kinds of things that I think we're trying to share with our faculty, is that, you know, if they've submitted something, you should be responding in a timely manner. It doesn't necessarily say how you provide that feedback, but what policies or guidelines do you have in place to make that happen?
Well, what I'm hearing is we have 4 of us now. Becky's not here, but I assume she's willing to continue, Kathy, to work
Yes,
on
she
this
is.
along with you and Deanna. So if not tomorrow, early next week, I'll send you all an email and try to schedule time when we can reconvene and maybe break up the work a little bit with some tasks without losing sight of the big picture. Does that sound reasonable?
Yep.
I think so, yeah. That'd make it a little bit easier to keep it under control, I think.
Okay.
So Tim, we were looking at, what was it, the 2 things, course development, instructional design, and then also course structure. Those were the 2 main areas that we were going to start with. Is that correct? Right.
And as Kathy suggested, although I probably won't do it over the weekend, we'll look at the course design, the course structure, the teaching and learning, and the other sections of the scorecard, because there may be 1 or 2 in a different area in the technology or whatever that, again, would be appropriate to include in a course review.
And I suggest reading those pillars, too, at the end of the handbook. I've just skimmed them very quickly because I'm trying to get through it, but those look like a good way. They kind of condense everything down, and that might be a good way to at least get an overview real quick.
Good idea. The last thing I would add is I think we have a great opportunity here to create something that's based on some standards from a long-standing reputable institution, but we're kind of in the driver's seat here. We can kind of pick and choose what we think works for our institutions and faculty and staff. And I think that's kind of exciting, rather than here's the QM stuff and thou shalt follow it to the T and print it out on blue paper kind of thing. So
and don't forget the pink polka dots.
Can't forget that.
Hey, this is Laurel. Was there any conversation? I missed the first about 10 minutes of our meeting today, but resurrecting maybe the faculty subcommittee so that they could be involved in the process. I think from the standpoint of my provost expressing, I think, very minimal concerns from just a few faculty member on my campus for why they wouldn't voluntarily take themselves through this process. I was thinking through this process, though, there would be an opportunity to present maybe what we're developing back to a faculty subcommittee comprised of faculty from our institution, so that I've got some faculty peer support when we go back to discuss this at our home institutions.
Laura, I think that's a great idea, and I would even go so far as to say, if all of you or any of you have a faculty member too who has the time and interest that would like to join our new group to help create the scorecard, that would certainly add more credibility to it and be a reality check for us as well. We've got a couple of great faculty members, but they are so swamped. At Washburn, I should say. Maybe you all have some folks who would be interested. And I'm thinking just 1 or 2, maybe
Right.
Somebody from the community college sector and one from the 4-year sector to add some balance.
Okay, I've got one in mind that I would love to have involved. I just don't know. Do you guys have a timeline of when you're going to meet to discuss this? And if so, I'm sure Kathy already knows who I may be implying, but there's some sort of commitment that I could provide him up front to say, okay, this would be the group's meeting schedule moving forward? Can I get you involved?
Well, I'm probably more aggressive, or will be more aggressive than the rest of you, since I have a little more time these days. Kind of what I was envisioning, and I haven't dusted off that draft implementation schedule, but I think a commitment of maybe 2 to 4 hours a week of independent work with maybe an hour-long meeting every other week. My hope would be that we could still launch something at this point, at least by the end of September, so we're ready to make that transition when the QM subscription fades into the sunset. Does that sound reasonable, Kathy and Deanna?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too.
I have a question. I mean, I love faculty, and I'm not saying anything bad about them, but they're very, during the summer, it seems like it's much more difficult to get their involvement into projects. So that's my real concern about including them in all of these meetings. Is it's going to be very difficult to get folks to show up.
I am faculty, by the way, so.
I wouldn't say anything bad. I mean, you know what I'm saying.
Back as like.
Okay, I'm just saying that it's summer.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying we do have some faculty representation already. So.
Okay.
I still teach too.
Okay, Becky teaches as well, but she's staff.
And I have some interest from my campus as well.
Okay.
Well,
Summer's just tough. I just think that's an aggressive timeline for summer. That's kind of my point.
We can get together and start it, and then in the early August, late August, we can get together a larger group to review and move forward. Because some of that early work really is going to be a lot of individuals doing the writing, and the feedback and revision and stuff would be more, I think, feasible with a bigger group. Yeah.
I think that's to me a little more doable than getting faculty involved in the development process early on. But then there might be some really dedicated faculty that just really love this kind of stuff and want to do it.
I think the more developed product we can show them, we'll probably be the better off. I have to agree, just because I love faculty, and I was faculty for years, but I've never seen people that can drag things out better than a group of faculty.
Okay, you were less kind about it than I was.
Especially, and the larger the group gets, the worse it gets.
They can find the details for the details. I think that's the best way to put it.
Well, my suggestion would be, if you all have a faculty member that you think might be willing to serve on a separate sort of subcommittee review beginning in August after classes are up, send me those names and contact information. And Laura, the person you referenced, if that individual you think might actually be interested in the upfront development process without dragging it out, I'd be happy to reach out to that individual too, once you've described what we kind of think is the time commitment involved.
Yeah, no, I think he'd be an ideal member. He was president of MODLA a couple of years ago, and in fact, I think he, as of July 1st, became an administrator or an assistant or associate dean in the College of Ed. But I think he'd be a great addition. In fact, when I talked to him briefly about this project a couple months ago, he asked me that if not only suggestions, but how faculty teach in an online class was going to be part of the rubric. So he's a real advocate for including that. So you might even have to dial him back on less pedagogy in the initial draft, and let him know that there's going to be a separate course for that. But I think he'll give some food for thought on how you can incorporate that.
Well, if he's been an assistant dean, he's seen the dark side then, so he knows how to keep things moving, I guess.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Tim, don't you think, though, that we can focus on the course development, instructional design, and the course structure yet this summer, And then, identify faculty members probably coming in the fall that would maybe focus more on the faculty. I can't even find the page now, but
Teaching and learning
part. A lot of the stuff in the course development and course structure was really things that all of our institutions probably already have in place. Processes that talk about how do courses get approved. We have a whole separate committee on our campus that's all they do. They look at proposals for new courses. They go through that. In theory, they're supposed to be looking at it regardless of the delivery mode and saying, we can do this both online and face-to-face. So I'm thinking every institution will already have something like this in place. We're not telling them what to do. We're just asking them, do you have something in place that does this, yes or no, and to what degree?
When you're looking at how people teach, it really needs to be from the faculty of that institution. There's some best practices in the scorecard, but my institution would throw a fit if we were going in and doing a major evaluation that way. We do have our separate online evaluation tool for faculty it's online, it's for online instructors, and it's part of the evaluation process. So we don't need to duplicate that. I like the idea of, do you have something in place that already does this for your institution? What is it? And leave it at that.
And that's exactly what, when I went through the training, we had to provide. Basically, when we went through a section, I provided links. Here is where you have stuff on copyright information. Here's where you have information on accessibility. Here's where you have maybe even a sample syllabus that might indicate here's what should go into a normal syllabus. And I think a lot of our institutions already have that. We're just saying, does your institution have these things in place, and provide a link or provide a Word document that supports that process.
Okay, are you there in Pennsylvania? I'm on my way up.
As I'm looking at the course development instructional design standards, and this is really why I did not include this initially in that draft as part of the proposal, was these refer to really some institutional practices and processes, whereas the course structure and even the teaching learning is much more specific to the course. It has less to do with how did you get here than is it there. And so I just want to be a little cautious that we don't have sort of scorecard creep from the course level into the institutional level, because again, I envision that as a much broader process that hopefully we can provide institutional members as well.
I have a question. Is there any worry about alienating faculty with the scorecard kind of idea?
Well,
I think that's always a possibility, but it depends on how you proceed at your campus. For us, it's just QM is going to this now, and this is what we do. But other campuses, there may be a huge faculty debate over it, and it needs to go through Senate or whatever before it becomes acceptable policy. And I think it's going to depend on how you present it to your faculty, to your administration.
And at our institution, this is in the faculty contract. They have to go through training as approved by the VPAA on quality assurance for online courses. And so it's something that they have to take. It's not something they have to use. So I think that's, kind of where we are. Is we have to have something for training for new faculty. We can't continue to use QM after October. I mean, it doesn't really even make sense to use it now, but we're going to use it until we get something else created. So for us, we have to start getting something created.
Well, the other thing I would emphasize as we move forward and work with faculty is that first and foremost, this is about improvement and development. This is not about evaluation. That's one of the key principles of QM, and that's the reason why it's a peer review process. And secondly, I guess, having said that though, we've got a scorecard from a nationally recognized organization that has, 1,500 members. And call them standards, call them best practices. This is sort of the way good stuff happens online, be it at the course or the program level. And there will always be people who don't want to have to be told they have to adhere to somebody else's standards. But I mean, we're in the world of accreditation, be it regional HLC, be it Department of Ed, be it, Kansas Board of Regents, or fill in the blank. So that's just part of the reality. But I agree, Deanna, how we present it as a consortium is important, and then how each individual institution member implements it in terms of policy, mandates it versus this is kind of a nice thing we encourage, is really probably going to be as diverse as our membership. And ultimately, when we first got into this, I remember the very first workshop we did, and I can't recall what year it was, but it was at Penn Valley. We sent 4 or 5 faculty members. There was probably a total of 30. And I specifically remember we had a psychologist, we had a historian, we had somebody from Allied Health, and forget who the 4th person was. They all came back, and they weren't zealots, but it was like, wow, this will really help improve our course and make life easier for me, because I won't have students asking me throughout the semester, where's the syllabus, or what's the policy on that, because that will have been dealt with up front from the very beginning with things like navigation. And so I think most reasonable faculty will understand that not only are these best practices, but it will lead to better student learning outcomes, probably higher rankings or satisfaction on those surveys that are separate from this. And ultimately, it's going to make their life better and easier.
That's been my experience. Every time we show the faculty the best practices and they start using it, they're pretty much sold.
And
even the most diehard.
And to that end, Ed, if I can shift gears momentarily, that's one of the reasons why I included in the proposal the faculty showcase, course showcase, or as I've dubbed it now, the faculty fest on the 3rd Thursday. I don't care when we do it, but I hope everyone had an opportunity to take a look at that one pager where I just plugged in the member names and some dates. Obviously, we'll need to plug in the course, the faculty number, and then I thought, oh, thank you, appreciate you pulling that up, to provide a little teaser with the most amazing highlight column. You all have some great faculty that have done some great things, so let's celebrate and showcase them, but let's try to use that as a way to sell the benefits of a quality review process. I know some of the faculty that we've got. I keep coming back to Vicki Kelly, who manages our master's in health science. She has, not only done all the QM stuff, she's a much bigger believer now really in OLC, but when she sits down and shows people, case in point, we just created a new master's in communication leadership, got approved last month by the Kansas Board of Regents. We're about to send it to HLC. We sat down with Vicki to say, tell us how you've made your courses QM and ADA compliant, particularly because they're being offered in a cohort 8-week time frame, much like what we plan to do with this new program. And after that 90-minute session with Vicki, the other people who were actually doing the courses went away and said, gee, I wish we would have talked to her 9 months ago, because not that, it's too late, but we would have saved ourselves some time and trouble in the way that we've designed these courses. So I would encourage all of you to nominate a faculty member for your institution, and if those dates don't work, this is simply a draft. We can mix it up, change it up, whatever.
Well, and because my school is the first on the list, I do have some faculty on our campus that I think I can certainly reach out to and ask them, to talk about, their course. And I think it'd also be nice if we had sort of a list of, there's things that I already ask faculty, how are you welcoming your students the first week of the semester? How are you introducing yourself? So maybe if we could come up with a consistent sort of list of items that they might want to showcase during that time period, I'm dang sure that I could find one, maybe two faculty that I could ask them to go down a list of things. How are you doing these things? And record that and make that available, you know, for other institutions to take a look at.
I agree, Ed. And I guess really what I had in mind, I didn't include it in this draft document, is that we wouldn't have a script per se, but sort of a template for them to follow. And my thinking was, in the way that Vicki has done this on our campus, is here are the QM standards. Here's how I've incorporated them into the design of my course. So again, thinking if we're kind of tying the two together, one approach might be to share with the presenters now the OLC scorecard, at least the course structure. Maybe we just start with the course structure and say, here are 8 standards that OLC has as a part of their scorecard. Can you talk about what you do in your course that reflect these standards? And maybe highlight 1 or 2 things that have been particularly exciting or successful.
So I guess it's all up to all of us to kind of start thinking about, do we have any faculty that are best practices that would be willing to kind of share their design and stuff with that? And with it being September coming around, I'm pretty sure that I can find 1, maybe 2 faculty that would do that.
Well, I thought of you, Ed, in particular, because I think in our last meeting, one of our meetings, you talked about a particular faculty member who you've used in the past, who wants to see other faculty members' courses because she's continually developing and improving. And I don't know if that's one of the 2 individuals you have in mind, but it sounded like she would be a great candidate for this.
I need to talk to my furnace person here real quick, but let me go ahead and I'll mute my.
Hey, this is Darla. I have a question.
Go ahead, Darla.
So are these going to be, I see your schedule, it's once a month, and it says a live showcase. Is this like at a location, or is this online like we're doing right now and people are just sharing their site and talking about it?
It's the latter. My thinking is we would use Zoom for a live session like we're doing today, and then people could pull up their course and just kind of go through whatever components they wanted to. My thought here is that this would be short and sweet and exciting, so that at the conclusion of each showcase, the faculty who tuned in for it could walk away with a takeaway thinking, wow, that's pretty neat what Ed Lovett's doing in that Intro to SOC course over at JCC. I think I'm going to take a couple of those ideas and embed those in my course. And ideally, what I think would also be helpful is if we had different disciplines. I don't think it would be as good if we had 5 Intro to SOC courses as if we had a nursing course, a SOC course, an accounting course, a fill-in-the-blank course, to show the diversity and breadth of what faculty are doing online in a really quality kind of fashion.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, that sounds really good.
Well, let me suggest this then. Why don't you take a look at the suggested dates and the time, and think about if you have a faculty member who would be available at that particular time and date for your institution that would be willing to share. And if so, send me their name and the course, and that way we can kind of compare notes and say, well, gee, we got 5 nursing courses, and maybe we need that SOC course from Johnson County instead of another a nursing course.
Do you know what time of day these will be?
I suggested 3 o'clock, but you know, on a Thursday, because I'm assuming fewer people are probably teaching on Thursdays at 3, but again, that may conflict with standing committees or other things you have at your particular campus, so it's merely a draft. I just think having sort of a standard date and time is helpful for people to think about. And quite honestly, my expectation would be if we do have different disciplines represented, if we're doing, for example, Washburn is doing a nursing course on December 15th, and we get that word out, we're probably going to have more nursing faculty from the other institutions than, say, accounting faculty who will want to zoom in for that presentation. But I have also, and I'm sure you have as well, had faculty in the past say, I learned something from an online course presentation in an entirely different discipline. Content's different, but sort of the course design and some of the kinds of things that faculty member did could be easily adapted and applied to my particular online course discipline.
Tim, I think that the thing about this is a work in progress. I don't think that we will have something that this is the end all to stuff that we start with. I think it's a process where, like you said earlier, this is a scorecard that's being looked at by a lot of schools. And it's not just, the KCREACHE consortium. It's a lot of schools are looking at this. We would have probably stayed with QM if it hadn't been for all of the crud we had to work through, to keep people certified and everything. I mean, the rubric that QM provided, I think, is a very good rubric. It has some really good information on it. That wasn't the problem. It was the problem about the other stuff that was going on. That we were getting a little tired of. I'm going to the D2L conference here in another couple of weeks, and QM will have a booth there, and I'm going to talk to them, basically that we're discontinuing our membership with you, and if they want to listen, I'll tell them why. But I think that we didn't have anything against the rubric. I think it was more or less the whole process that we were a little bit disappointed with.
Yeah. And by the way, they raised their prices this week, I noticed. It was modest, very modest, though, for all those benefits.
I did get feedback from Wichita State. I don't know if the rest of you saw that. They were not going to continue with KCREACHE. They will be also presenting. They actually have paid platinum for sponsorship at Sidelight. So I might have a chance to kind of visit with them a little bit and maybe get them to reconsider. But, I think some of these schools, are heavily invested, as some of the people in the KCREACHE consortium are. And I would never say that the schools wouldn't be able to continue in your own institution that way. But I think from us, we just were not using all the stuff that QM was providing, and then the restrictions that I felt were being placed upon us for all the stuff that was behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And Tim, I would say that the cost has gone up dramatically in the last few years based on not the consortium cost, but the retraining and the retraining and the retraining and the new certifications and one role separated into 3, each of which needed its own training. It's been crazy.
Well, and Ed has mentioned that on a number of occasions. You're right, Dan. It's not just the subscription. That's kind of just the beginning. And
yeah.
I'm Ed, not to beat up on QM too much, but I'm assuming when you did the OLC Mastery Series that they didn't use Moodle for that?
Actually, they did.
Really?
Yeah, I was kind of, I still get the QM notifications because I went through all of their training, so I get these notifications, and some days I'd have to look and say, is this a QM thing I'm getting, or is this an OLC thing I'm getting? So they do, but I think that the important thing that I noticed in my training is that you weren't judged right or wrong. It was basically a process of saying, do you have processes in place? And how do you support this? And each of us, there was probably about 20 of us that went through the training. It was kind of a repetitive process of saying, okay, how do you deal with this particular standard? And then we were encouraged to go out and give feedback on that. So I think it's a very much larger approach to online learning. It's not just the course design. It is the technical support. It's the institutional support. It's all that stuff, bundled into one thing. And once again, Tim, if we don't have everything in place, for fall, I think we're starting the conversations on our campus. I'm going to take a lot of this back to my advisory council. and we're going to divide and conquer. Not one area on campus can fill out this entire scorecard. It's going to have to be split up between lots of different areas on our campus to make that work.
It's a new day in KCREACHE.
So I guess we're coming up on the top of the hour. What I think I'll probably do is, Tim, if you can send me just some bulleted items that maybe we can put together with Gary to present at the Sidelight Conference.
Sure.
I don't think you're going to have people that will continue using QM. That's not our intention to, say don't go that direction. But I think that the consortium brings the ability to share ideas and to talk about issues that are going on. That's one of the benefits to KCREACHE is that, hey, I've got this going on. How do you deal with it? I mean, the big thing right now that a big hot topic is cheating. And I'm going to have to figure out, if I can have some sessions on our campus about how to deal with that. And so, that's something that I think all of us encounter. Maybe it's just a sharing of approaches.
Yeah. I agree, Ed.
On your campuses, how do you guys deal with that? On our campus, we have Proctor Now that we use. I'm just curious.
Well, on our campus at Johnson County, we have a testing center, and some of our faculty are adamant that their final exam has to be done in a proctored environment. And probably 95% of our students live in the Johnson County area. And so our testing center is open from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. in many cases during the week. And so it's not a huge hardship for them to come on our campus. It doesn't cost them anything. For instances where they're not in the area, we work with another consortium of national testing centers throughout the United States where, they've got testing centers at K-State, KU, Wichita State, where they may have to pay $25 or something, but, that's an option. The other option that we're looking at is something called ProctorU. ProctorU will be at the Sidelight Conference, so if you want to talk to them, that's just one of many different products that are out there. But it's becoming a huge issue where just this past year, we had some students, international students, that were sharing their username and passwords with other students. And these other students were basically taking the tests for them. And so, how do you deal with that?
We're moving into using Smarter Proctoring, which is Smarter Services. It's a testing management tool with our testing centers, and it gives it allows you to select like a group of testing centers that are automatically approved, but each student then can go in and say, I need a proctor at 3 a.m. in this area, match me up, and they can find proctors that have already been vetted and their fees are listed, that kind of thing. It's pretty inexpensive for our institution, and it helps our testing centers manage, the busy hours and that kind of thing, so they know what to expect as far as how many students are going to come in at any time. So it gives you that somebody that is going to be checking ID and checking and doing the proctoring the way you want it to, and not just my mom's going to do it, but really she's whatever. This is her fake email, but she's really proctoring me, which we get into quite a bit. So we're looking forward to that, implementing that this fall.
Nick, at UCM, we use Respondus Exam Builder. So this year we're implementing Respondus Lockdown Browser and Monitor. With not passing any fees to the students, we're going to absorb the cost, but it was pretty inexpensive.
And Washburn did the same thing, Laurel, but I do know K-State has used ProctorU, and they do pass that cost along to the student.
We looked at KCKCC, we looked at Respondus Lockdown and just found that it was really easy to bypass because smartphones and tablets are so ubiquitous that students were able to cheat very easily with an iPad or an iPhone and a computer at the same time. So we're still looking.
Is that in conjunction with the monitor piece, Susan?
Yeah, you put the monitor on your desktop or laptop, and then all you have to have is a tablet, and you can get into everything. You just log in twice. It doesn't prevent dual logins. Because you're not using the lockdown browser on the tablet, you're just using the regular login.
It would work in a testing center, but not at home testing.
And we kind of felt like if you were going to do it in a testing center, you just should do management by walking around. So that didn't really answer the problem for us.
Yeah, I didn't like sending them out to testing centers because that negated the convenience of taking an online class, but I didn't want to pass the fees on to the student. And this past year, Respondus seems to getting smarter in terms of its technology. So it flags students in terms of movement for the faculty member. So if there's abnormal movement, they had an iPad in their lap and they take a look to their lap or look to the left or look to the right. Respondus
I must have lost somebody.